Wow. Distinguished rabbis, shalom. To the Muslims busily preparing for Ramadan in a couple of days, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To everyone, a big welcome to the first in what will be, I think, hundreds, and I mean that, over the next 11 months, hundreds of events like this all over this great city of London. I was at an animal welfare event in NW10 this afternoon. It was very busy, and many of the people there knew of the launch of this campaign this evening, and some are here. But I had 5 conversations in particular with what I call traditional Londoners. Real, all women, real pearly queens they were, rhyming slang, real London accents. And all 5 of them, 5 separate conversations, said the same thing, that the working class are being pushed out of London. That's what they said to me. And so the first election pledge I'm going to make to you this evening is that if I'm the Mayor of London, the working class will be coming back into London and will no more be pushed out and marginalized. And I couldn't hear Max all that well, but I know that you did, because it's not possible to listen to Max and not hear him well. But what I understood that he was saying is the second of my election pledges. We will no longer tolerate an organized crime racket going on in the square mile in the city of London, in the heart of this great capital city. We will not tolerate it morally. We will undertake an unremitting campaign to bring to book those who brought Britain to the brink of disaster and who continue to ply their wicked trade under our noses. And as I'm going to point out in an open letter I'm going to read to you now for the first time, people who say, well, the mayor doesn't have power to do that. Just you watch. Just you wait and see. Nobody yet in my life has been able to persuade me that I don't have the power to take them on, that I don't have the power to tackle them, that I don't have the power to rally millions of people against what they're doing. And insofar as the Mayor of London is limited in power, that's part of my project. In this period of devolution of a parliament in Scotland, a parliament in Wales, a northern powerhouse in the north of England, it's time that London got its share of the power, and I'm going to fight for it. I don't accept that the City of London is entitled to build a moat, a legislative moat around its activities. I don't accept that the City of London has the right to its own pet police force. The City of London police, they have fancy uniforms, no doubt. They might be good at catching pickpockets in Liverpool Street Station, but they failed to notice the theft and malfeasance of hundreds of millions of pounds over these last 7 years. So take notice, if I'm the mayor and I can do it, there'll be no more City of London police. The City of London police will merge into a London police force which looks like London, which is led by people who look like London, who treat all Londoners the same, whether they have a white collar or a black face. That's the kind of police we demand here in London. You're 28 times more likely, 28 times more likely to be stopped and searched in London if you're black or Muslim. Why aren't they stopping and searching the white-collar criminals in the City of London? They'd find far more in the pockets of those. I'm going to deal with the housing crisis, and in detail, that is pushing the working class out of London. I'm going to deal with policing in London. I'm going to deal with transport in London. I'm going to deal with the economy and jobs in London. And I'm going to deal with culture in London. It's a £17 billion a year budget. And it's been run for 8 years by a blonde buffoon, a multi-millionaire clown who has achieved nothing for ordinary Londoners. And those things he does claim to have achieved actually were done by Ken Livingstone, the only decent mayor that we've ever had here in London. 8 years of Boris the buffoon, and nothing is coming through the pipeline. Boris Johnson inherited a whole plethora of plans, projects, developments, including the Olympic Games, including even the Boris bikes that are Ken bikes, and which are now, I see, coloured red in anticipation of my mayoralty beginning next May. But Boris, after 8 years, has achieved nothing, and there's nothing coming through. That's a problem, but it's not an insurmountable one. It means that I will inherit that £17 billion a year budget and use it for ordinary Londoners right from day one. I've written this open letter, which I'd like to read to you, because it's being released this evening, and I think it's very important. What did I do with my glasses? I need glasses to look for my glasses. I see The Guardian describe me today as a veteran politician. Well, I'm only 60, and my likely Labour opponent is 68. Maybe we're both veterans. The difference is, she supported the war in Iraq with all her might, and I opposed it with all my might. She said she'd throw herself under a bus for Tony Blair. She really did say that. As Ken Livingstone pointed out, well, we've introduced a lot of buses, so she's got plenty to choose from. And as one of the leaders of Unite just across the road pointed out to me, we've got many a bus driver that would like her to take a leap in front of their bus. Sorry?
She took a free taxi ride from me last week. I got a picture of it.
Oh my goodness. I'm coming on to taxis in a big way in a moment. I don't know if she took a free taxi ride. I do know that Dame Tessa Jowell, to give her full name, will do nothing to stop the driving out of the working class from London. I know that she'll do nothing to stand up against the party machines, to be a person of independent mind, like Ken Livingstone was. Ken Livingstone won an election as an independent, and I intend to win this election as someone outside the political process, the political class. I don't take orders from anyone, and neither did Ken. The only interests that I will be pursuing are the interests of ordinary Londoners, whoever stands against them. Let me read you why I am standing for Mayor of London. I have lived in London for almost 35 years, in Blackheath, in Battersea, in Streatham, in the East End, in Ladbroke Grove, and now in NW10. 3 of my 4 children were born in London, and all 4 grew up here. My first child is now the mother of 4, all born in London. Like many Londoners, I was not born here, but I regard it as my home, and I think of London as the greatest city in the world. I was a London Member of Parliament for 5 years in Bethnal Green and Bow between 2005 and 2010. And in 2004, I stood for the European Parliament constituency in London, and some of my comrades are in the hall this evening who stood with me. Respect was just 20 weeks old, and I achieved almost 100,000 votes. 11 years later, we have to multiply that 100,000. 500, 600, 700,000 is the target that we have. And with second preferences from the Labour candidate in 3rd place, that can take us over the winning line. I have been elected to the British Parliament 6 times, served there for the best part of 30 years, and want to bring the political experience of nearly 4 decades to bear in fighting for you, fighting for London. Though London is a great city, the 7th largest economy in the world, life is not great for all Londoners. And it is run by and for the metropolitan elite, many of them dripping in gold, whilst the majority struggle with the high cost of living, the shortage of affordable housing, cramped and expensive transport, and savage cuts in public services which have the support of all 3 of the so-called mainstream parties. It is time for a London for all, which will be the theme of my campaign. We will fight for your interests wherever you came from, whatever color you are, however you pray, or if you don't pray at all. We are against all racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and for unity amongst all Londoners, irrespective of age, gender, color, creed, ability, or orientation. London's transport will be a major issue in the election. Our policy on fares, staffing levels, investment, disabled access, airport expansion will attract transport users and providers alike. Financial services are an important part of London's economy, but the interests of the city cannot be allowed to blight those of the vast majority who have other interests. London's reputation cannot be allowed to be tarnished by the excesses of the city. Malfeasance cannot be allowed free rein in the financial heart of the capital. That's why, if I'm elected, I will merge the City of London Police into a new London police force with responsibilities to all Londoners, and which looks like London. And if the City of London Police don't like it, I'll send the Metropolitan Police's Serious Fraud Office in numbers to investigate their affairs. The city and other corporate interests in London will have to do more, much more, in the exercise of their social responsibility to the Londoners who live and work around them and who provide the whole environment in which their businesses are thriving. We understand businesses need to make money, even a lot of money. But with great wealth comes great responsibility. And as mayor, I will work tirelessly to achieve that. I will campaign relentlessly for the London living wage to take account of the far higher cost of living in the capital. And I give notice now to all those businesses doing business with the mayoralty and with the London Assembly. If you're not paying your workers the London living wage, you won't be doing business with us any longer. Neither can we allow the continuing social cleansing of poor and ordinary working people from London. Eye-watering house prices and back-breaking rents are driving the life's blood of London, its people, further and further to the edge, literally and metaphorically. The average price of houses in London sold to first-time buyers is 7.5 times the average income. London has the second highest house prices and per square meter rent in the world, higher than New York, higher than Hong Kong, and only Monaco, about which more later, is higher. Overcrowding in London is almost 3 times the national average. 250,000 people in London are on the council house waiting list. The rate of house building is half that of the 1960s and a quarter that of the 1930s during the Depression. Between 1998 and 2011, 85,000 council houses were sold in London under the Right to Buy scheme, and only 880 were built to replace them. 880 new council houses in 15 years, whilst 85,000 council houses were sold. Mrs. Thatcher committed many crimes against us, but the sale of council houses was the biggest crime that she committed on the domestic level and has led to a housing crisis all over the country as well as in London. Now, how about this? It's not easy to shock me. 50,000 families have been shipped out of London in an act of social cleansing in just the last 3 years. London boroughs bribing people to leave their families, leave their homes, leave the streets in which they've grown up in, and move to Birmingham or Stoke or elsewhere in the north because they simply cannot or will not build the houses or find the money to subsidize their rents any longer. And amidst all of this, we are spending £24 billion a year on housing benefit. A quarter of the government's total budget deficit is being spent on housing benefit, almost half of which ends up in the hands of private landlords. It's unbelievable that 9 times the figure spent on social housing is being spent to subsidize private landlords in housing benefit. And guess what? A quarter of the Tory MPs in the last Parliament were private landlords, which gives you a clue as to why this has been tolerated. The annual budget for the building of social housing in Britain is just £1.1 billion, half of what it was in the previous Parliament. 1.1 billion building houses, 24 billion spent on housing benefit, almost half of which goes to private landlords. Virtually no council houses are being built, fewer than 100 per year. Targets for the provision of social housing are set ever lower and less frequently achieved. Ken Livingstone had a policy that 50% of all development must be affordable housing. Boris Johnson cut that to 25%. In fact, it's less than 10%. If I'm the mayor, nothing will be built in London unless 50% of it is social and affordable housing. London properties at the higher end have become nothing but a safety deposit box for rich foreigners. They buy houses to lock up their money in the belief that it will make a profit, far away from the eyes of the regulators in their own countries, far away from prying eyes of all kinds in their own countries. And they never live in those houses. So let me make another election pledge. We will compulsorily purchase any house in London that hasn't been lived in for 1 year or more. A 250,000 Londoners on the housing waiting lists. Millions living in overcrowded housing, poorly housed, or paying so much for the roof over their heads in rents and mortgages that they have nothing left for life. So I will tackle the housing crisis as my #1 priority. We will compulsorily purchase, and we have the power to do so, any house that's been unlived in without a proper excuse for 1 year or more. And as I say, there will be no development given planning permission that doesn't include 50% affordable housing. Now, as a man of the world, I will work to make London more and more a world city, seeking out investment, business, and tourism, especially in those parts of the world I know best: Russia, China, Latin America, and the Arab world. I will fight for more power for London and recognition of its special status in its national life. This is the era of devolution, which I wholly support, but I want devolution for London. We need to be treated in the new constitutional settlement that is slowly taking shape, with power over health, over education, over tax, over business rates, with real power that will allow a mayor of London, directly elected and accountable to the people, to make a real difference in the lives of our citizens. Since the 1960s, London has been a cultural capital in the world. I will work hard to keep us right on top. Cultural workers and cultural spaces will be boosted in my mayoralty, as will be the burgeoning high-tech sector. Film, music, games, theatre, and cinema flourishing, innovative and groundbreaking. Work in finance with cryptocurrencies, and I've recruited the best possible Minister for Finance and Economy in Max. We'll make London the cryptocurrency and alternative finance capital of the world. But tradition matters too. Take the black cab, for example. We have lost our telephone boxes. Our pillar boxes are now owned by the King of Kuwait. Gives a new meaning to the Royal Mail. We never knew we'd still have a Royal Mail, but it would be the King of Kuwait who owned it, thanks to privatization. We cannot allow Uber to drive out the traditional London cab. And if I'm the mayor, as I said on the front page of The Badge, the weekly newspaper of the cab trade this week, I will run Uber out of town if I can. And if I can't, I will make sure that they start to obey the law which black cabs and minicab firms are forced to obey, but which Uber is shredding in front of our eyes. Why do I feel so strongly about this issue? Well, it's not just because there's 25,000 cab drivers with a vote in the election. Every one of them with a husband or a wife and children and parents and brothers and sisters. Though I'd be a pretty stupid politician if I denied that that had any part in this. It's not just because none of the mainstream parties will stand up for the law-abiding, tax-paying minicab and black cab owners and drivers. And none of them will. It's not just because my own son-in-law is 3 years into the knowledge on a bike that I had to buy him and runs the risk of finishing the knowledge and the trade being finished before he gets here. Though that also occupies my mind. I don't know what I'm going to do with that motorbike if he chucks it. It's because of this that Uber represents exactly the kind of no tax, unregulated, cutthroat, open, private capitalism that we're against in every other form. They're supposed to have a landline. They don't have even a landline. Try phoning them. They don't have one. They're not supposed to have meters in the car, but many of them do. They're supposed to be insured, but many of them are not. And as the Independent showed this week, in fact, no, it's not a lie. No, it's not a lie. The Independent, you can come in later. You can come in later. You can heckle. You can heckle, but you're only doing my job for me. I'm telling you, the Independent. All right, sit down now and I'll let you speak later. This is the facts. As the Independent newspaper revealed in an investigation this very week, forging insurance for Uber is easier than falling off a log, and many of them have done so. A cab driver is forced to buy a certain kind of vehicle costing £40,000. An Uber driver can turn up in any kind of vehicle. A cab driver has to show that he's a person of good character, who's thoroughly checked, his driving record's thoroughly checked, his personal behavior is thoroughly checked. He's stopped on the street by transport for London officials. His car is checked. The cleanliness is checked. None of that is true because Uber represents the kind of capitalism that Johnson and Cameron represent, and that ends up like Alton Towers. Ends up like Alton Towers. You see, red tape, health and safety, the usual targets of the right wing, are there to protect the public, and the public will always be protected if I am the Mayor of London. And I have thought for a long time that way too little has been done to remember the sacrifices of Londoners when this country stood alone with Hitler and fascism at the Channel ports and the Blitz raining down upon us. I'm one of those who does believe this was our finest hour. So if I am the Mayor, every year there will be a Battle of Britain weekend, a mix of solemnity and fun. 1940s street parties, dressing up, air shows, exhibitions, film and music of the era, a recreation of the spirit of the Blitz. I believe this will bring all Londoners together, wherever they came from and however newly they arrived. It will remind the young of a defining moment in the history of this country and of London, and remind newcomers of the greatness of the London they are now an equal part of. I hope you will support my campaign and that of my respect colleagues standing for the London Assembly, which will be elected on the same day. Few know anything at all about the London Assembly members now. If respect gets a foothold at City Hall, you can be sure that will change. We will occupy City Hall and we will open it for the people. A London for all, a London for all its people. Thank you very much indeed for coming to this launch today.